Hello, and today on More Than One, the studio growth story, we're joined by Elle Kealy, founder of MO, the playful and powerful Reformer Pilates brand that's taking Bristol by storm. Elle launched MO in 2022, starting as a cocktail-fueled HIIT idea that quickly evolved into a thriving Pilates concept. With over 25 years in dance, fitness and training, Elle's built two buzzing locations in Clifton and Wapping Wharf, known for their cheeky vibe, inclusive community, and signature classes that welcome everyone from complete beginners to seasoned athletes. Beyond MO, Elle also runs Move Union, a consultancy supporting studios and instructors across the UK, giving her a rare 360-degree view of the boutique fitness industry. Today, we'll explore her aha moments, the lessons learned scaling from one studio to two, and how she's blending integrity, personality, and growth to shape the future of boutique fitness. Let's get into it. Elle, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on the reformerpilates.com podcast. With your permission, we'll just fire straight into it, if that's okay. And to kick things off, I know that you started MO back in 2022, if I'm not mistaken, as a HIIT concept, born over a cocktail is what I read, and then pivoted into Reformer Pilates. Tell us about that kind of aha moment and, how has that kind of playful spirit shaped your, brand identity today?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. We actually started out as you said, a HIIT and bar studio. So very different to where we are today. And back in 2022, we were just coming out of the back of COVID. So I'd actually been working over in Asia for 13, 14 years. The idea was to bring my studio concept from there back to the UK when I moved back here. And then COVID happened and everything just kind of got put on a back burner. So when we launched, we were really thinking about bringing some of the concepts that we'd seen over in Asia, over in Australia, those kind of really boutique concepts to an outside of London market, because there's loads in London in the UK, but as you get further and further from the capital, there's slightly less. I couldn't find somewhere that I wanted to go to. But what was really interesting is that when COVID came about and we launched at the end of 2022, there was a really big shift, I think, in the way that people started to think about their wellness, their fitness, what they wanted from a workout. So we were in that period of time where we were going from, really high intensity, smash it out workouts to suddenly longevity, or, is this actually going to make me feel good every single day? And is it something that's sustainable? And so I had always wanted to run a Reformer Pilates studio. I actually worked for a really big Reformer and Pilates studio over in Hong Kong for a long time. And I'd seen some of these amazing concepts come out of Australia, but it wasn't really something that was done at the time. We had some limitations with our space. And then I think in early 2023, we managed to resolve those. And I had the opportunity to put in another modality to the studio. And that's when Reformer came about. And that was just kind of like my aha moment. But on a personal note, COVID as well, I had gotten ill with COVID and I'd had some health issues. So I had been unable to train in the way that I used to train. So I wasn't able to do intense workouts. I wasn't able to go to the gym and smash out really heavy weights. And so I had really sort of shifted my own workouts into Pilates, which is something that I could do and still got great results. And so that was really that moment when we started doing that. And I just thought, you know what, this is it. I want a workout that's going to feel like a workout, gives me strength, gives me results, but also makes me feel really good. And so we just tried to create a studio that kept all the good stuff from traditional Pilates, but gave it that little bit of a mojito twist. So that's kind of how MO was born.
You mentioned there you'd spent a long time in Hong Kong, but I'm right in saying you've got over 20 years of experience, dance to fitness. I'd love to hear a little bit about how those early experiences have influenced, the vibe and the values behind your studios.
Yeah, so I mean, way back, because it is over 20, I think it's over 25 actually, Carl.
Still over 20. It's still 20. It's still over 20.
It's a lot of years. But way back, I mean, I when I was young, I was a dancer, and I never really thought about exercise or movement as a form of exercise. It was just something that was baked into what I did. I loved it. It was really joyful, and I wanted to share that with other people. So I loved teaching. I loved teaching beginners. I wanted to open up that possibility of how great it felt to move to as many people as possible. And so this was like very early 2000s. I hired a studio. I called a few dancer friends to teach. I worked out how to get to the top of Google, which was very forward thinking back in 2001. And I kind of accidentally launched this massive dance teaching business, or dance studio business, and it completely blew up. But I will say that I didn't know anything about running a studio back then. So if anything, my dance period kind of taught me was all the mistakes, all the things not to do. So we didn't have business coaches, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have Google. I was 23, I was figuring it out on my own. I made a lot of expensive mistakes. But the fitness sidestep, that actually happened further down the line. When I had children, I sort of started getting back into fitness to work again on myself, became a personal trainer, nutrition coach. I did a lot of studying different methodologies around that time. So everything from strength and conditioning to rehab to postnatal fitness. And I started to really think about what it was that I wanted from my workout. So I wanted something that felt really joyful, like dance, gave me that sort of kind of, oh, I can't wait to go to class feeling. But I also wanted now results, which is not something that you traditionally get. Dance is not a fitness modality. It's done to look pretty, right? So I wanted to kind of make sure that there was some science behind the workouts that we were doing, and we were really going to get results from it as well. And so, I think the MO now is really a combination of those two aspects. It's a child of those two things. It's technical, it's fun, it's results driven, it's full of people who just want to move better and feel really good doing it. And so that's kind of how those two things merged and came about to what it is.
Well, you were talking about, 23 and figuring it out. You obviously did figure it out. In just a few years that MO's been around, you're now 2 locations in Bristol. I'd love to understand a little bit about that specifically, as you alluded to. Lots in London, not so many outside, or that's changing, that's growing clearly. But I'd love to know, in terms of the 2 locations that you chose, a little bit of the kind of strategic considerations in choosing those sites specifically.
Yeah, so I think when you're starting a studio, choosing a site is probably one of the most important considerations, because if you get that wrong, nothing else is going to work. And it's also one of the most difficult things to start out with. One of the things that working in Asia taught me was that, everything there is tucked away in a high-rise building on the 30-something floor. So you don't have any street frontage, you don't have signage. And what that taught me is that you can absolutely succeed without being on a high street or people, footfall walking past and looking at a sign. If you get that, then that's amazing. But in the UK, it's quite challenging to find affordable spaces with the right footprint that give you that. So we were able to kind of think outside the box and go away from that traditional model. And again, I think in COVID, or prior to COVID, sorry, you would traditionally be going to city centre locations and catching people before and after work. But how the industry and how people are exercising has changed is that we're now able to go into residential areas. That was actually always my business model for my dance studio as well. We were close to where people lived, not where they worked. So you're able to kind of look at premises that are in locations that historically the fitness industry may not have gone to. So I will say that we look at our demographic first. So both of our locations, we've got one in an area called Clifton, one in an area called Wapping Wharf down in Bristol. These are places where our core demographic already like to spend time. They've got great coffee, they've got good food, it's a really walkable area. Someone can pop in for a session, go out and meet friends, and it feels like their workout is part of their lifestyle. So you really have to know who your market is and where those people operate and where they're going to be, and try and get yourself into that position. It doesn't have to be prime, but it does need to be somewhere that's really convenient, because people will no longer travel long distances for things. They want that convenience of it just being down the road, either from work or from home. We also look at footprint. So before we even take a space, we're thinking, can I get a floor plan? I want to work out exactly how many reformers I can get in there. What are my numbers going to look like in this space? Because if I can't quite get enough in to make the profit margins that we need, then no matter how gorgeous the space is, it's not going to be a good business decision. So we're always looking at the data on that as well. And what's really exciting, I think, is once you've got one studio, you already know a lot of the data points that you're going to need to cross-reference to find your second. So in a way, finding your second location, you're more informed going into that than you were with your first. None of our locations are perfect. I think in the UK, it's very difficult to find property that has that beautiful open space, the perfect rectangle for a reformer. I'd love to see it, but we just don't have those big business parks that you'll see in the US or that you'll see in Australia, those new build buildings. Often we're in period buildings, we're in high street, we've got offices or flats above us. So there's compromises that need to be made. But as long as all the numbers sort of stack up, then that's really important. I'm also making sure that every square foot that we're paying for can be used. So that means we're not spending a lot of money on changing rooms or juice bars, because for our business model, our clients live nearby and we've got a coffee shop next door. So we don't need to be tapping into that and having that spare space. And again, fit out costs. So what is the time for a return on investment? If I'm walking into something that's pretty much done and all I need to do is give it a lick of paint and put some reformers in it, then amazing. But maybe I need to do a full renovation. Maybe I need to actually build out, and I want to know how long it's going to take me to get that money back and factor that into the business model as well. Business rates as well in the UK, that's a huge driver of whether or not a property is actually going to be viable. So doing all of the research on those things, I think is really, really key. When you know your area because you live there, it's not particularly difficult. And I think a lot of people probably start their studios in a location where they live. So they know that this road is great and this road's probably a little bit dodgy, so we just don't want to be on the corner of that one. But once you start to expand outside of your local area, the more and more you have to rely on data points to make these decisions and to really do your market research, because I think that's when it can get easy to get it wrong. And that's something that I did in my dance business. We expanded across the UK. We had I can't remember how many locations we had. I want to say about 17. And the ones that I knew were always the easiest to set up. The ones that I didn't know were the ones where we were going in a little bit blind. And one of the mistakes I made was not looking at those data points and not having that really in-depth knowledge. So yeah, lots of learning along the way.
Thanks, Elle. That's really useful advice for anybody looking to, start first, expand. Critical information that you have to look at it from a quantitative perspective, as you say. On the other side, like quite different other end of the scale there, when you are expanding, you've done all the numbers, you've done the analysis, you've done the evaluation. Then in terms of maintaining your product, maintaining the balance and that kind of fresh, cheeky vibe, how do you maintain that and that consistency across multiple sites?
So I think that's one of the other things is it's all about your team, because the people, as you expand, if when you're starting out, it's just you. So you are the vibe if you're going to be an instructor and you're going to be an owner. Maybe you've got a team of instructors. So it's all about who you hire. So for us, it's team, it's training for our teams and making sure that we've got a consistent experience when someone walks into one studio and another. And that's everything from how do you greet clients? Are we using their names? What's the terminology that we use in our classes? How are we delivering our classes? What's the music that we're using? What's the language that we're using? We want to make sure that we've got a very on-brand experience, and that's backed up not just by saying, okay, I'm just going to hire some reformer instructors and pop them in and it'll be fine, you've got 5 classes, but we have a very, very robust onboarding and internal training process now, and we didn't have that when we started. I think it would be unusual these days for somebody who's starting off with one studio to actually invest in that. But as you start to grow, that's how you're going to maintain your brand, your vibe, your quality, and therefore, that's going to translate, and clients are going to really buy into that brand. I think it's really interesting as well, because you said earlier, we are starting to see more and more studios coming into the market outside of London. So even, small towns, everyone's getting a Reformer Pilates studio now, which is really exciting. But we're in this phase where it's no longer going to be that you're the only player in town. And so therefore, I think your brand and how you keep delivering your version of what it is you want to do is going to be so important. It's what we see in markets like Australia that are 10 years ahead of us. We're really getting into that phase now where brand differentiation is key. But yeah, it's all about the systems, the training, and the team.
So your signature classes are CoreForm and FitForm, which I understand caters for complete beginners to athletes. Developing that dual approach, why do you think it, firstly, what resonates so well, do you think, with those classes, with that diverse clientele?
Yeah, so to be honest with you, at our studio, we do the first studio, Clifton. It's a multimodality studio. So we're not just a Reformer Pilates studio. We've got bar classes, we've got mat classes, we had HIIT classes, and then we had Reformer. And one of the challenges as a multimodality studio is to try to market different types of classes to different types of people. It's quite simple when you're doing one thing. So if you're a Legree studio or Megaformer studio, and you're doing one type of workout, you've got one type of client, you're marketing maybe one class, and you've got levels 1, 2, and 3 max. That, from a marketing point of view, is actually quite simple, and it really allows you to kind of nail down. So I will say that we haven't made our lives simple at MO by offering these different options. But in terms of our Reformer classes, our CoreForm class is what Pilates insiders would know as pure Pilates. It's not classical Pilates, but it's very much, these are the Pilates principles. It's moves that you would see at almost any Pilates studio that you go to. Whereas FitForm this is my baby. I love FitForm because it is that blend of fitness and Reformer, and it's what we were seeing come out of the more athletic Australian studios. People like KX Pilates are really good at this kind of stuff. It's the kind of workout that I wanted, and when we started, this wasn't really a thing in the UK market. And so for us, there was an education piece for our instructors who maybe had done their training but never been to any of these types of studios in the US, or never been to any of these types of workouts. So we had to build out, again, that internal training around what that actually looked like. And I think what it allows us to do is to cater to different demographics. We've obviously got more than one target client. We have people who are students come to our classes. We have people who are busy professionals. We have new mums. We have people who are 60 plus. We've got almost everybody. And it offers that variety, but also it gives people a choice. If I really just want to work on my core stability and my mobility, we know Pilates is great for that. But if somebody's got a body composition goal, is it really enough to be doing Pilates? And maybe that's an unpopular opinion. And I think if you came every day, it is. But the majority of people in the UK don't use their memberships that often. We're very different to the US. In the US, we know that people will come on average 4 times a week. If you come over into Europe, we're looking at 2 times a week. So we wanted to create a workout that would actually get them those fitness type results if they were to come 2 times a week. And that's kind of where FitForm came in. We do level our classes. So the CoreForm, because it is a pure Pilates class, we do have CoreForm, and then we go on to level 2 and advanced. So if someone is looking to learn the Pilates system and they want to start doing those advanced exercises that you see on Instagram, when your leg is up in the air and you're balancing on one hand, there's a space for that. And you can see that progression. I think people really, really like that. But this all comes down to training. There's huge debate I'm sure you are aware, in the Pilates industry about what we should or should not, inverted commas, be teaching in these group studios. We have 12 beds in our studio, and that's not a small number of people. So we have spent an enormous amount of time making sure that the training that we do is suitable for group Reformer fitness, and that what we are doing is safe, and that it can be translated into managing a room of that number of people, and that we're being quite honest about what it is that we are offering. And so, I hope that answers your question, because it is a tricky one to answer.
Yeah. But you touched on it there in terms of, the range of different people that you have in your studio. So it's inclusive, it's welcoming, it's non-intimidating. How do you embed that into the culture? Because there's still people that may feel inhibited to take their first class. What is it that you do at MO to make people feel comfortable when they first walk in?
I think it comes down to, before they've even walked in, they're going to have looked you up online, right? So what are you talking about on socials? How are you presenting yourself? Are they actually seeing the faces of your smiling instructors saying, hey, I'm so-and-so, come and give it a go? So you've got to think about really that client journey from before they even get to your studio, because you can turn somebody off immediately if your marketing's not spot on. But as soon as they get to the studio, that's really baked into our onboarding and instructor music. We have instructor training and music that we play. Even our instructors are taught how to greet somebody. So we have a system for what happens when a new client comes to the studio for the first time, and it starts before they've even gotten to their first class. We're checking in with them, making sure they've got all their questions answered. They know who the manager is. They know who to contact. They know who I am as an owner. And then when they get to the studio, the instructor knows their name. They know it's their first class. They're going to ask them some questions. We train our team to make people feel seen rather than just make them sweaty as well. Because I think that's really the key thing, isn't it? Boutique fitness is about community, and if you're not building that community by remembering where someone went on holiday last week, or remembering that so and so's got a dodgy shoulder and you don't want to check in on them, then you're not really going to be building that community. I remember when we started out, and I was teaching a lot of classes when we started out, I knew every single member's name, and we had over 1,000 users at the studio at the time. It helped that I was teaching so much, and I'm really good when there's a checklist in front of me, so I can actually learn everyone's names. But even if I'd never met them, just from sort of emails and seeing them on the system, I could pretty much tell you about every single client that we had. As we grow, that gets even more challenging, because now I'm not teaching, so I'm not actually meeting them personally. But that's why having a great team that really cares about their clients, I think, is so important. They are the face of your studio. They are the interaction your clients are going to have day in, day out. So we want to make sure that they're really connecting with them and offering that really sort of high touch onboarding process.
You mentioned the experience before they come in the studio. So I'd love to touch on that a little bit in terms of your marketing approach, and specifically, storytelling. As you mentioned earlier, I think it's going to get more competitive, right? It's hard to perhaps mirror the scenario in Australia. I think you referenced, we're kind of 10 years behind. So, what role does, storytelling play, do you think, in marketing and retention strategy?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. Storytelling is, I don't know if you've read the book Story Brand by Donald Miller. If you haven't, it's amazing.
On the list. Thank you.
Yeah. And it's a really great read. It's all about how you can place your ideal client as the hero of the story. So I think people need to see themselves in your studio. And one of the mistakes that we used to make, I mean, honestly, when I started out, there wasn't such thing. You didn't have great photography. We didn't even have iPhones, for goodness sake. We couldn't even make our own photos. Stock photography wasn't really a thing. There was very limited amount. So you would be launching a website with some really dodgy stock photography, and that was basically it. Whereas nowadays, I think it's all about showing, again, comes back to who's your ideal client, showing your ideal client what's in themselves in that position, answering the questions that they would have, and really putting yourself in their shoes and thinking about what is it they would want to see. So I see a lot of studios who have, by the way, tons of followers, right? So they're looking great on social media. Maybe they're posting reformer flows, creative reformer flows, which look fantastic. They get a huge amount of engagement globally. But if I was a new client coming into that studio, do I really want to see your advanced reformer flow? I want to see a little bit. I don't want to see a new one every week. That you're going to get a ton of followers who are other instructors who are stealing your flows. You're going to get a ton of followers who may be designing a studio and work in, that aesthetic sort of brand, and they're into the branding of it all. Instead, I think we should be focusing on things like, well, what questions do they have? They want to see what the space looks like before they come in. Let's give them a tour. Maybe they've got questions about what happens if you're a complete beginner, or how do I get my feet in the straps? Or just think about those little things that would be holding somebody back from coming into your studio, and creating content around that, whether it's blog posts, whether it's behind the scenes. And we're constantly trying to sort of drip feed those things in. I mean, I will say for my studio, we've only just hired a marketing manager. So I was doing all of the marketing myself. I was doing all of everything myself for quite a long time. And I think this is something that we're constantly working to improve, and constantly working to make our studios more accessible. There is a vibe at the moment with Pilates where I think there's a fashion for it to be a very sort of aesthetic thing to do. So we've got this Pilates princess aesthetic going on, and I would love to see more studios step away from this and really build their own unique brand. It's getting to the point where, so many studios, I wouldn't be able to tell them apart if I was to come across their website or to come across their socials. And it also really limits what Pilates is and who it's for. So we want to make something, MO, that's unisex. We want to make something where everyone, no matter who they are, where they're coming from, actually feels welcome. So we've had to take a bit of a step away from the aesthetic and really think about our clients. And it's an interesting one. That's definitely a market, but is it a trend? I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we will. As things get more competitive, as you say, perhaps that will be a natural dynamic which will, sift out those that are perhaps a little more fad orientated than than true longevity. But I'd love to understand some of the lessons that you've had as an entrepreneur in boutique fitness. Could you share some of those learnings? What surprised you?
You know, I was thinking about this the other day. The biggest surprise for me was how quickly you need to become a leader of people. And it's something that I don't think we think about when we think, I mean, yes, we think about our instructors, but when we think about starting a studio, especially if you're teaching yourself, you don't actually necessarily realize that your role is going to evolve very quickly into that leadership role if you want to grow. Now, maybe it's just you and you're teaching classes. You might have maybe one or two other people that are helping you. But if you're looking to scale, at some point, you're going to start to be a manager. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to scale. And this took me a very long time to learn, Carl. So it's the most useful lesson as well. So I think the more that you can start to think about how can I start thinking with my CEO hat on or with my leadership hat on and really starting to lead from the top, then you're going to give yourself a head start when it comes to kind of building your business and really growing. And those were skills that I didn't learn them at university. I didn't learn them until, I started building my business and realized, hold on a minute, there's a huge gap here. And it's also really difficult. I thought I was building a fitness brand. I wasn't. I was actually building a team and a culture and a space where I wanted other people to be able to grow as well. And that's hard if you're an entrepreneur like me, who really thrives on doing things alone, to kind of let go of control and say, do you know what? I think there might be somebody who's better than me to do this, and I want them alongside me. And now that's been the biggest shift, and I think the biggest surprise and learning as a studio founder, how important that is. It's all about your team.
Yeah. Because you also run Move Union as well, right? So, supporting studios and instructors with training and consultancy. I'd love to hear a bit more about how that broader perspective, informs your own studio operations and anything else.
Yeah, so Move Union was really born out of necessity because when I started the first studio, we could not get enough instructors. So it became pretty clear that we needed to train our own, especially because we were teaching that format that wasn't necessarily part of UK traditional Pilates, Reformer Pilates training. So we wanted instructors who could teach, high energy, results driven reformer classes, and those didn't really exist yet. But we also wanted them to have a really strong foundation in the traditional Pilates system. So we thought, as you do, we'll build our own training program. And I knew that we needed that before we could go ahead and do Studio 2, 3, 4, 5. And so that's now its own thing. So Move Union is really a standalone business. We don't just operate within our own studios. We've worked with multiple studios and instructors across the UK, helping them train their own teams, helping them build branded class experiences. Maybe they've had classes running and everyone's just coming in and teaching their own thing. So we're helping them kind of build together that experience that we've been talking about in today's podcast. Not every studio is necessarily going to have the capacity or the time or the inclination to run their own teacher training programs. So we're really passionate about the opportunities that this offers, about raising standards in the UK and offering that experience as the market grows. And of course, it benefits us because when we want to launch a new studio, we know that we've got a training provider that we can go to, and we could go into a location where there's absolutely no qualified reformer instructors as we're looking at it. And by the time we've opened, we've got people trained exactly how we want them to launch. So really exciting for Move Union. Lots of big stuff ahead.
Excellent. We've touched on this a little bit already, but again, I'd love to really get the inside view of that switch from one studio to two. We used the analogy before when we were chatting ahead of this about having one child and then having two. But talk to us about what are some of the most formidable challenges that you come up against when you go from that one to two, and what did you put in place to overcome that?
Yeah, so I think before you even get there, the first thing is to really think about why it is that you want to go from one to two and making that decision to scale. I spent a lot of time thinking, should I even do this, before we made that decision? Because you've got options, right? You've got your one studio. Is it working? Is it profitable? How much more profit can I get out of this one operation? Because if it's just about money and you want to earn, I don't know, maybe there's a certain amount of money that you've got in your head that you want to get to, are there ways that you could actually refine what you're already doing without adding more complexity and adding more cost and adding more risk from that one studio? If you've sat down and you've done that and you've thought about, okay, well, actually, this is why I want to expand. Then it makes sense. So for me, it's about freedom. I sat there and thought, I actually want to be able to be an investor in my business, meaning that I hire out all of the day-to-day tasks. And in order to do that, I need enough revenue. It's actually 2 to 3 studios for us to be able to cover that and enable me to take myself out of the day-to-day. But if you love teaching and you want to be in your studio every single day, maybe managing multiple locations is not for you. And I think we don't talk about this enough. Just because you can expand doesn't mean you have to. And it's not a sign of how successful you are. You don't need 5 studios to be a success. You can be a success with one really solid studio done really, really well. And so sometimes for me personally, it was very difficult to sit there and think, what's my reason for doing this? Is it an ego decision because I want to have a load of studios and look really cool? Or is it actually a practical decision? And it came down to practical. And I think that was step one. So once you've made that decision, it's all about the systems and the processes. So we were lucky. We started our teacher training business, way back when we opened. So we were ahead with that. We knew we had that in place. But studio going from 1 to 2 is not double the work. It's more than double the work. So you have to have systems for every single thing. And when it's just you and, an issue pops up with your one studio, you can solve it with a WhatsApp message. But when you've got 2, you need to have a process, you need to have a system, you need to have every single thing that you're doing in the day-to-day nailed down so it can be replicated by somebody else, because you're not going to be able to cover everything 24/7. And so I'm the kind of person who I'm probably the kind of person who would just jump in and figure it out later. But what I've learned along the way is that this probably isn't the best way to scale studios. So I spent a lot of time nailing down those systems. Are they perfect as we go to 1 to 2? No, there's still things that as we've made that transition, we're like, you know what? We need to go back. We need to revise that. So when we do it for 3, 4, and 5, that's not going to be an issue again. But if you've got those things in place, 1 to 2 is a lot of work. And then 3, 4, 5 is actually so much easier. And that's where you start to kind of get that traction and be able to really make those cost savings as you spread some of your overheads across your group.
Right. So on that, looking ahead, what's your vision for MO and Move Union, growth, future studios, formats, geographies?
Yeah.
What's the plan?
So we're eyeing a 3rd and 4th location for MO at the moment, which is really exciting. These things take time in the UK, as I mentioned right at the beginning. I think finding the right location is just the hardest thing. But those are in the pipeline. And for Move Union, we're working on building out our online platform and working on partnerships with other boutique studios across the UK. So we're spending a lot more time partnering with studios who have started up and maybe want to train their teams or bring in an extra modality or really refine what they're doing. So it's really exciting. I think it's a really great time to be in the reformer industry and to get started at the moment.
Best of luck with all of that, and I hope it moves quicker. That's certainly something we see frequently, is the frustration that leases on properties and just the whole general pace of things can be frustratingly slow. But let's not get into that.
It's another podcast, isn't it?
Yeah, probably. Well, look, advice, Elle. What would you advice would you give to other fitness entrepreneurs? Aiming to scale as you have, but doing it with both kind of integrity and again retaining that personality.
Yeah. So my advice would be you need to know what you won't compromise on. So whether that's the quality of your instruction, maybe it's inclusivity, maybe it's team culture. I would have that very firm in your mind as to, because this is where the danger happens, is that you are making compromises to expand fast. So know what you will not compromise on and make sure your foundations are strong. Otherwise the cracks are going to show really, really quickly. If you've got one studio that's not working that great, try and fix that first before you expand. And I think most of all, talking about, going back to that leadership role, I think you just need to be thinking, treat other people who are in your sphere the way you want to be treated. Pay your team on time, be fair, listen to your employees' dreams and goals. How can you take them with you? Because what I love about our growth is that as we grow, our team grows, we win, they win. And that's really how we make sure that we're staying in integrity with everything that we're doing.
Thank you, Elle. I've got one last question. It's, I suppose it's connected to the topics, but slightly off topic. What has given you unbridled joy in the past week? I know you've opened a studio, so maybe that's it.
Do you know what? It should be, shouldn't it, Elle? What's the honest answer to this question? and it's embarrassing. So the one thing that gave me real joy, there's two, I'm going to give you two. The first was that I solved a really complicated tax problem last week, and I literally jumped up and down, danced around my kitchen because I was so pleased with myself. But aside
I understand.
from that, no, I mean, yeah, I know it's another entrepreneur problem, maybe. But no, aside from that, I mean, I think the reason we all do this is because we want freedom to do what we love and spend time with the people that we love. And that's ultimately the most important thing. And so what I love about scaling is that it has given me the time to spend with my family. So I just love hanging out with the kids and watching trashy TV on Netflix. And that is one thing that kind of makes it all worth it. You know, when it all comes together and you're able to do that and not be stressed and thinking about work.
I agree. Good thing recently on Netflix. Any tips? Any content you'd recommend?
I've been told by my son not to name the show because he's scared someone's going to listen to it and be embarrassed. But I am going to name the show. I've been watching The Summer I Turned Pretty.
Okay. All right, you might have some explaining to do there. Let me know if that needs to be edited out. Thank you so much. This has been really insightful. I know that the launch you've had already for your second location in Bristol has gone incredibly well. We haven't referenced that, which is very modest of you, but I know that it's done tremendously well in its first week, and I'm sure it's going to continue with you leading, and excited for everywhere it goes, but at the same time, still, as you say, spending the time and doing the things that are most important to us. So thank you so much for taking the time today. All the best.
Thanks so much, Carl. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye now.